Welcome everybody. With me today, I have Mathieu Ferry. He's the head of product development at 4D, joining us from France. I have Komoncharoensiri, director of technical services from the U.S. office, and myself, Will Taylor, the technical account manager from 4D US. And with us today, we have a lot of really, really good demos. So I decided to keep the team. This is the whole product team, product and marketing team that comes together on this webinar. And you're going to be seeing demos from all of them as we go through today. So big, big thank you to them and their hard work on not only the developing these things for the products, these features for the product, but also for making them palatable bite-sized demos for us to be able to review today. So thank you very much to the team as well. So, um, so before we dig in, let's hear what people have been saying about the 20 R10 beta release. So 20 R10 is still in beta. You can download it from the beta forum. And a lot of people have. So, and they said things like, this release is a really big deal. They said it completely transforms the way they work with entities. They saw the beginning of a deeper AI integration, and others highlighted smarter, more nuanced triggers that solve real world problems. And we'll see more of that later. And yeah, even those who are still exploring the feature saying that it's looking really promising. So thank you all for showing up, testing the new builds, testing the new feature releases, even when they're in beta, providing the feedback. It's critical to us and the success of the R release program. So really want to take pause and thank you and your comments from that. So today's agenda, it looks short, 4 things, but actually we have a lot of ground to cover. So first we're going to start with AI for 4D. Next we'll move on to 4D Qodly Pro. Then we'll cover some development related improvements into the 4D application, and then a few deployment related enhancements. So during the session, you'll see live demos, and you'll see some live demos, and you will be able to clearly show you how these features are working. And before we get started, just please, when you have a question, if anything comes up during the, excuse me, if anything comes up during anything, questions to your mind, come to your mind, feel free to put those in the Q&A portion of Zoom. Q&A portion allows us to have history of how we answered what we answered, and also it allows us to follow up in the case that we make a mistake. All right, we're all human, we're doing this live. So without further ado, let's get started with 4D for AI news. In this release, we've added new capabilities that make AI integration more direct and useful in your real projects. But first, let's take 2 steps back and talk a little bit about vectors. So most systems today rely on keyword search. And to be fair, it works. When the wording is consistent, when the phrasing is predictable, when everything's written in the same language. In that kind of clean, structured world, it hits the nail on the head, right? In a clean world, everything is perfect, everything makes sense, but that's not always our world. And data isn't always that simple. So for example, if you're looking for text in your application in a document that says reset password, but you type resetting password or resets password, those don't match. If someone wants to write fix password, repair password, or resolve, um, the uh, the query gets lost. And even small changes like reset, instead of typing reset password, you type password reset, you may not be able to find what you're looking for in your data file. And context. Keyword search can't tell the difference between, let's say, a riverbank or a financial bank. So there's a gap. It sees words, but not meaning. It sees patterns, words, letters, but not meaning or context. And that's how here's how it shows up for years. Your user types in what makes sense to them, like reset passwords, and they get irrelevant or outdated results, or worse, nothing at all. Even if the answer is buried in a PDF, a help doc, or even in a different format, keyword search just is not able to reach it. And the frustrating part is that the answer does exist. It just doesn't use the exact same words. Maybe it's phrased like trouble logging in, or it's written in another language. The intent matches, but the system can't connect those dots. And what we need is search that understands meaning. That's where vector search comes in. It doesn't rely on exact matches. You can give it text, an image description, or even a code snippet or a file, and it all works. It captures your intent, what you're trying to do, the context, how and where you're asking, and the concepts, the underlying ideas behind your words. So whether it's a password reset guide, account recovery, or just support, you can get there without needing the perfect words. So what exactly is a vector? Now, at its core, a vector is just a list of numbers. Nothing more, nothing less. Think about GPS coordinates. To locate Paris on a 2D plane, you don't describe it with words. You don't say, go to London and turn right, whatever. You give it two numbers, latitude and longitude. For example, 48.89 and 2.37. That's all it takes to pinpoint more or less Paris on a map. No keywords needed. Now, if you take those two numbers and plot them on a grid like a 2D space, you get a point of exactly where Paris is. And that's what we mean by a 2D vector. Two numbers working together to find a position in two-dimensional space. And of course, a vector doesn't stop at two numbers. It can hold many more. Thinking about, let's say, fruit as another great example. We could describe a piece of fruit or a type of fruit based on its sweetness, acidity, and crispness, for example. That gives us a three-dimensional vector. Now let's say apple scores high on sweetness, low on acidity, and is quite crisp, whereas an orange is a little less sweet, more acidic, and less crisp. The values aren't the same, but if you plot them in the three-dimensional space, not necessarily there, you still end up with them near each other because they share some of those traits. And in practice, vectors don't stop at these traits either. You can capture hundreds or even thousands of dimensions, each one describing a different aspect of meaning. That's what makes vectors so powerful. So now we've seen how vector search works in practice. Let's take a step back and understand how you get these vectors in the first place. Well, you just start with about any type of content, text, image, code, or a file. The content is passed to something called an embedding model. So what exactly is a model? A model is just an AI program that's been trained to recognize patterns in data. And in this case, the embedding model has been trained to recognize meaning, not just the words you typed, but the intent behind them, the contents they're used in, the overall idea. It then translates that meaning into a list of numbers, a vector that represents it. Because this vector comes from an embedding model, we call it an embedding. In other words, every embedding is just a vector or number, a vector of numbers, a list of numbers, that captures meaning. Now, these embeddings aren't generated by 4D. We're not there. Or we ever, I don't know. But yeah, they come from providers like OpenAI or Llama, probably things you've heard about, whose models are built specifically for this job. And because each provider trains their model differently, vector size and structure may vary or varies, which means that the similar results can differ. So you can put in similar things, but get different results depending on the model you're using, even with the same content. So what can you build with vectors in 4D right now? Semantic search that understands meaning, not just keywords, perfect for matching user questions to the right legal clause, HR policy, or enterprise document. Think about the search bar at the top of KB, for example. Maybe things like that. Image recognition that reads visual patterns, useful for retail product marketing, identifying parts in manufacturing, or assisting diagnosis in healthcare. Smart recommendations that adapt to user contents, ranking resumes, screening applications, and triaging emails with suggested responses. And last but not least, anomaly detection that learns what's normal, then alerts you or the appropriate people when something's off. Think fraud detection, security breaches, or unexpected behavior in IoT systems. So now that you've seen how vectors are created from text, let's talk about how 4D puts that right into your fingertips. With 20R10, you get the brand new concept, the 4D vector, and it all starts with a few lines of code. Use 4D AI Kit to call AI's embedding model, just like we showed you earlier. That gives you an embedding result from which you can extract the actual vector, simple, direct, and natively in 4D. And once you have your vector, you're not on your own. 4D gives you built-in methods to compare vectors right out of the box. The most common one is cosine similarity. That's what most systems use to measure how close the meanings are. So it's the angle between the vector, cosine. You can also use the dot product if you care all about is the two vectors are pointing the same direction. And there's Euclidean distance, when the real question is how far apart are they really? So yes, this is semantic math, but it's already handled for you. No external engine, no hidden layers. Just you, your data, and full control, all running natively inside 4D. Now, all right, let's switch to our first demo where we'll show you intelligent document analysis with AI with 4D Pro.
In my application, I have a list of documents stored in the database, and I want to let the user search through them easily. Until now, keyword search seems like the best solution. But here's the problem. You have to type the exact word. Vector search works differently. It's based on meaning. If the meaning is close, it will find the document, even if the words are different. In my database, I have several technical notes. Let's start by entering the API key. Now I will search for notes that explain how to add a section. Here are the results, sorted from the most relevant to the list. Next, let's try with a typo. Even with the error, the AI understands my search and returns technical note about image as the top result. Let's go further. I'll run the search in German, while all my documents are in English. No problem, the documents are still sorted correctly. Now let's look at the code. First, we generate a vector from the prompt. Then we compare that vector with the vector of each document. To do this, we've used the cosine similarity algorithm. The document with the highest score is the most relevant. And that's it. An easy, intelligent new way to search your 4D report documents.
Thank you, Vanessa, for that really cool demo about how to use 4D with interesting ways of searching through multiple languages and etc. So very cool. Next, I'd like to introduce Bosma. We'd like to show you how semantic image search can work in 4D.
Hello, this demo shows semantic search with AI using 4D.vector and 4D AI Kit. Here it's with image descriptions, but the same works for any text in your application. You can enter your OpenAI key here, and if you don't, the application will prompt you when it's needed. Here is a matrix of pictures saved in the database. Let's first try a custom prompt. Let's say I type fresh leaves with water droplets, rain or dew, and click Apply Custom Prompt. The matrix updates, showing the most similar images at the top. Now let's refine it. Autumn leaves floating on water with ripples. This time, autumn leaf images appear first instead of regular leaves. The results adapt to my description. And even if my grammar is bad, the application still understands my intent. For example, if I type big water drop and green leaf look shiny. Not proper English at all, yet it still brings back the correct matches, because vectors capture meaning, not grammar. It also works across languages. If I type the same query in Japanese, the application still finds the right result, because comparison happens at the vector level independent of language. And if you don't have an OpenAI API key, you can still use predefined prompts from this list box. They're vectorized beforehand, saved in the database, so they run instantly with no AI calls. For example, let's pick a colorful and playful video game world with imaginative scenery. The application returns the most relevant descriptions immediately. You can also upload your own picture. Once uploaded, it becomes searchable just like the others. Now let's trace the code and debug the flow. When I hit Apply Custom Prompt, the calculate function runs. If both a prompt and an API key exist, the AI management class generates a vector for the prompt and returns a 4D vector. Then calculates vectors, loops through all stored description vectors, calculates similarity, and sorts results by cosine similarity in a descending order. When I hit Apply Selected Prompt, the application runs the Calculate with Selected Prompt function. No embedding step needed here. The predefined prompt is already vectorized. It just compares that stored vector against all description vectors and sorts by similarity. When I upload a picture, the vectorized image description function runs. The image is encoded as base 64 first, sent to OpenAI Vision to generate a caption and a description. Both are saved with the picture entity, then embedded into a vector. That is encoded as base 64 first, sent to OpenAI Vision to generate a caption and a description. Both are saved with the picture entity, then embedded into a vector. That vector is stored in the database, so the uploaded picture can now be found through semantic search. So, whether it's a custom prompt, a predefined prompt, or an uploaded picture, the workflow is the same. Vectors are generated or reused, compared and ranked by similarity. All you need is a prompt.
Really cool. Interesting way to use 40 AI Kit with your pictures if you have a lot of them in your database and you like to search for them. So super cool and right straight out of the box. Next is a longer demo from Mathieu. And he's also here to answer any questions that you may have on AI or Qodly. He's here for the first hour. So if you do have your questions, it'd be great to run them by him while he's here. And we can always answer them after, or if you do have questions later. So without further ado, let me get this other demo queued up for y'all.
Detecting duplicates in a database when you can compare exact values is easy. But detecting similarities between records, identifying if they are alike without being identical, that's more difficult, but it's very useful. For example, when a user creates an invoice in an ERP system for a client or adds a contact in a CRM, detecting if a similar client already exists is very helpful. When creating an incident or a ticket, is there already a similar issue or ticket in the system? It's valuable to know that. Today, we'll see how 4D and 4D AI Kit can help you provide this kind of answers, of functionalities to your users. We'll explore this through a demo which we'll make available to you. This demo, as I just mentioned, was created for the AI kit. We'll start with the data part. The demo comes with a pre-filled database, but these data were generated using artificial intelligence, and I'll show you how. Here we can generate about 10 clients. We'll generate them in batches of 5. Let's click on the Generate Clients button. With this demo, we wanted to provide an easy way to visualize the model at work. This is made possible through asynchronous programming. In the AI interactions section, you can see the prompt that was used, and we see the AI model in action. We simply asked it to generate clients in JSON format, and that's what we use to populate the database. We can also work with a local provider. Here I have Ollama installed on my machine. We'll use a model like OpenChat here with Ollama. Or actually, let's use Mistral. We'll ask it to generate fewer clients, 5 clients in batches of 2, and you will see why in a moment. So we'll ask it the same question. However, the execution speed will be slower than with OpenAI. But we can see it working. Compared to OpenAI, there will be a difference in quality. The data might not be of the same quality that what I got with OpenAI. But as you can see on the screen, it's still solid. We'll let it finish. What's interesting here is that none of this process involves cloud exchanges. So data confidentiality is maintained. That's an important point. But if we want both data confidentiality and performance, we can add another provider in this demo. We'll call it Ollama Distant. Here we have a machine that's a bit more powerful than my local setup. So we'll simply enter the data. The demo will detect the installed models, reasoning models, and embedding models. Usually we use Nomic with Ollama for embeddings. Here I can tweak the default reasoning model if I want, but it's not crucial. Now let's see how I can use this remote provider. It's remote because it's not running on my workstation, but still it is Ollama and not OpenAI. Confidentiality is maintained. We'll continue using Mistral and ask it the same thing. You can see the model working much faster than before. We are down to 3.6 seconds per client. We can generate, say, 10 clients in batches of 5. And the model performs very well, very quickly. We're achieving speeds comparable to OpenAI. 1.5 seconds per client. So before we continue with the demo, let's not forget about vector calculations, in fact embeddings calculations. Generally, local Ollama handles this very well. There's always some initial model loading time, both locally or remotely. But if I run it again, it will recalculate all the vectors in the database very quickly. So, Now I have my vectors and my clients. Let's move on to the core of this demo, the similarity search. We'll perform a similarity search with a threshold of 0.9, and here we found 82 clients in the database in just 200 milliseconds. That's quite fast. So 82 clients with similarities. Let's take a look, for example, at Eric and Nguyen. This record is close to these two other records. Why are they close? Indeed, the first name and the last name are identical, but there is a small difference, a K at the end of Eric and an accent on the E of Nguyen. Nevertheless, there's a match. The email isn't exactly the same either. fastemail.co, fastemail.org, fastmail. This is typical of errors an operator might make when entering an email address given over the phone. There's also a slight discrepancy in the phone numbers 0291, 0292. Such duplicates would be hard to find using traditional methods and algorithms. But with vectors, you can find them easily. The lower the similarity threshold, the more discrepancies you will find. For example, if we adjust the slider to 0.7, we will find many clients, 260 with similarities. Here, the clients, they don't share much in common. A similarity of 0.7 isn't very high. If we increase to 0.94, we see Jasper Jazz here has many similar records, some with high similarity, so 0.94, but others, like ORDA Diaz, at 0.8. Here it's quite different. What you need to understand is that the results returned by vector comparisons depend on the vectorization model you use. Additionally, it's essential to vectorize intelligently. Currently, in the demo, for simplicity, I vectorize all the data of the records, but there are other options. Let's move on to another feature now and see how we can alert the user while he's entering information about a customer that may already exist in database. So let's create a client named Eric CK Nguyen. We'll perform an initial similarity search, lowering the threshold, and we find 3 similar records, but as seen, the similarities are low. Let me show you how this evolves as we enter more data. We'll indicate that Eric lives in San Jose with an accent, and we immediately see the similarity increasing. Let's add an email, faster-mail.com. This email doesn't exist in the database. We'll just run another similarity search, and now we see a similarity of 0.89, which is quite high, even though the email is spelled entirely differently. This is another example of errors easily made by data entry operators. Let's add more information, like the postal code 95123. Assuming the postal code is entered correctly, we find now a similarity of 0.91 for this record. It's up to you to determine the right threshold to alert users based on your data. In this case, it may be helpful to show the user the top 3 matching records to warn them about potential duplicates, even though the first name doesn't exactly exist as entered, nor does the email, and San Jose was typed with an accent. This would be challenging to achieve with traditional algorithm using regex, for example. Let's look at the code, which is quite simple. You will have access to the demo anyway. We'll set a breakpoint on the relevant code section. When I click the Search Similarity button, it triggers this function. So I'll set a breakpoint here. Clicking brings us to this code where I call a singleton vectorizer to calculate a vector. This vector is based on a string derived from the client's data. As you can see, I simply concatenate the client's known values. And this is what I vectorized. And this is stored in this vector type variable. The vector variable is now a native type in 4D. Let's delve into how this vector is obtained. Let's go. It's done by calling AIKit with an AI client using .embeddings.create and passing the value. The value here is simply the string we saw earlier. Let's inspect the vector. It's a vector of length 768 obtained with Ollama's nomic model. Next, I compare this vector to the existing vectors in the database, the vector we calculated earlier, of course. I obtain a similarity score using the cosine similarity operation. I compare this vector to those of the clients in the database, and here I get 0.56. My target similarity being 0.7, as I set in the UI, so I won't retain this client. Currently, I process and compare each client in the database with a for each loop. In a future 4D version, you will be able to perform this operation directly within an ORDA query, which will support vectors and similarity operations. Finally, I build a collection here, which I simply return to this UI. This presentation is almost over, and this demo comes with a few bonuses. You can directly generate a client here by selecting your provider and model, just like that. Here I've generated a client from scratch. This lets you see again through these AI interactions sections how the client was constructed. You can compare how it works with different AI providers. For example, using OpenChat, and there you go, you can compare them. Another interesting bonus feature is address formatting. Imagine your user is a bit lazy and doesn't want to fill out each address field individually. It can be tedious. So here you can copy-paste an address and format it automatically. You will get different results depending on the provider and model you choose. You can compare them for fun, but also to tune what you want to achieve. It's up to you to select the model that suits you best, whether it's from OpenAI, which offers many models, or Ollama. It's also essential to craft an effective prompt, since it plays a significant role in this. But check the code, you will see there's nothing complicated. You can input poorly formatted addresses and the model will handle it. It extracts all the relevant elements from the text. For you users' productivity, it's, I think, a valuable feature. So to wrap up, we've covered a lot in this demonstration. We've seen how to use for the AI kit with a cloud provider like OpenAI, highly performant, highly efficient. We've also explored using a remote Olama server to ensure data confidentiality, and we've seen how to search for fuzzy similarities in a database using vectors. So thank you, and I hope this inspires many ideas to you.
All right, off demo now. That was great. Those are great, amazing demos, all three of them. So really appreciate for the team. Really interesting to see how you can use these AI features on an existing database with a lot of data. Maybe you have a ton of data that you want to clean up. This could be a really cool way to do it and to show how the data matches and how all the vectors work, swapping between different embedding models, etc. So very cool. Thank you, Mathieu, for that. And so that's just the start of this demo. Love to hear your feedback on it. And then just a reminder that 40 R10 introduces the vectors. So we're actually and we provided you a little foray into that world. And we are also preparing a dedicated webinars that will take this much further. So the date will be announced really soon, so stay tuned for that in your email box. So, and we had a couple questions that showed up during the discussion. So if they keep coming up, feel free. I'll just quickly call them out right now. So someone asked, is using local AI, does the AI, sorry, the first one was, so a lot of the demos are in the blog. So if you do, and we'll be sharing also the demos if we don't have them in the blog. So is the data submitted for vectorization retained in the cloud? I think we answered that with if you use a local provider, nothing goes to the cloud, which makes sense. If you rely on a cloud service, it should be described in their terms and conditions. So maybe, right? So I think the answer is maybe. Read the manual. But I guess the question is, maybe the more intuitive maybe what I'm understanding from that is you want to get the vector, extract the vector, and store the vector, right? When you want to use it, updating the vector as you need. That way, I think the demo from the 40 Pro searching, all of the documents were already vectorized, and then the only vector that you were asking for on the fly was for that specific wording that you were going to be searching for, be it in German, be it in French, or in English. So I think that may answer that question a little bit more. Hope that answers that question, but it's a really good one. And then someone asked, using local AI, does the AI CPUs in the computer mean that it's much faster? Running AI models locally is really machine intensive. We're seeing that. I think we're doing a lot of benchmarking ourselves with really expensive and really powerful machines in the cloud, pretty much. If you look at the machines that OpenAI are using, it's hundreds of $1,000s a machine, right? We're not getting that ourselves, even if you really wanted it, right? Maybe Mathieu can talk a little bit more about what we're doing and what we're seeing, if we're able to talk about that. I'm putting him on the spot while he's here.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it really depends on. I would not recommend running Olama on the same server than the one you're running 40, for example. It especially for generative AI, requires a lot of power. Basically, I would put that in a dedicated machine, and the more you have in it, the better. Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, and especially RAM. RAM also is a very important.
Yeah.
Embedding, it requires much less. It's really the generative AI part who is really demanding.
Yeah. Yeah, and someone mentioned that, and that someone mentioned correctly, the vector, and this, let's reiterate this, the vector doesn't, of course, like an index, the vector works as long as the initial data doesn't change. If you change the picture, of course the vector needs to change. So
Yeah.
maybe we can talk about touched events later. We can talk about things like that, or we can talk and things
Yeah.
like that later about ways and times that we can maybe update the data when the data's been changed.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, this is why also, not only for this, but why also we're working on events, but we're working on other things also to ease everyone's life,
yeah,
not only events. And this is all these parties. We really focused on vectors this time. So vector and vector comparison or embeddings, it's the same. It's not, let's say, 100% AI. It uses AI to a model to get computed, but afterwards it's just pure algorithm in 4D. We're working on more stuff, really AI oriented. But
cool.
for the future, it's for 21. Yeah.
Yeah, very cool.
This is
Someone
awesome.
asked, yeah, someone's really excited about this on their application. They're asking, can I use this in binary mode? And I'm going to say, why are you in binary mode? I'm going to answer that differently. I'm going to answer the question with a question. What are you doing? If you need help getting to project mode, any one of us we can talk to us and we
Anyway,
can
I think you can
build another
try. I
application.
think you can try in binary because AI Kit, it's a component. So you can run component, you can load component project mode into your binary app. But honestly, I don't know.
But will it work in the data model?
I
Are you able to add a vector field in your database in
I'm
binary?
not sure. I'm not sure.
I know at some point things will
Yeah.
start to break. We'll
Yeah.
talk about it later.
Binary
We want
doesn't have classes, and also I probably we have in AIKit functions or things like that I'm not sure. I'm not sure that it will be supported properly in binary mode. Yeah.
I would say if you want a modern usage, modern application with modern AI features, you have to use modern 4D. That's going to be my answer, probably. And then we can talk about that, about how to get you there. And then Jody asked, he's looking at computers now. 30, 60, 16 core. Can't help you there, Jody. I have no
I
idea.
don't think neural engine.
Neural engine. Yeah, I just
As far
quickly
as I
Googled that.
know, it won't help a lot with Olama stuff, for example. It will help for Apple intelligence, I guess, or Apple stuff. But Olama is mainly GPU, CPU. There are other inference model that you can use, other stuff than Olama. And in this case, I don't know. It can help, but I don't think it will make a real difference. The basic stuff is raw GPU, RAM, and so on.
Yeah,
It's
cool.
CPU as well, but more GPU.
This is a really interesting question. Will AIB kit be integrated into 4D or as a 4D, let's say, standard offering, or is it always going to live in a component?
No, it's meant to be a component, but for the View Pro, for the Rai Pro are also the same kind of thing. You will see in 21 also with the new dependency manager, you will be able to load it in a very nice way. This is how we design stuff now, this kind of thing. It also allows you, probably it's the first time I will announce it, but AI Kit, the code has been made public a few days ago. So you can open it, see how it's made, and propose stuff as well.
Cool. Very cool. Interesting.
And so
I
you
didn't know
can,
that.
for example, download a branch, a given branch that would be experimental or your own branch, based on it and run it as well. It's quite nice.
Very cool. So if anything comes up, thank you, Mathieu, for being here. Staying late for us, answer our questions. This is really cool. And if anything does come up until the end of Qodly, since the code is open source, it won't require a separate license at one point. I don't think
No.
this is not the plan at all.
It requires a separate license at no point.
Good thinking there. Always keeping the tight book, money book. All right, cool. And someone asked in the chat, the question, I knew it was coming. I answered in the chat. How about Tahoe? Support of Tahoe. Tahoe just came out. Give us some time to run through all of our regression tests. It's not on any blog post yet because it's too fresh. Totally valid question, but every time there's a new version of an OS, we need to go through. A lot of testing needs to be done, a lot of manual testing, because a lot of things change in the OS, even especially for us, the lower level programming stuff. So we just want to make sure, but as it stands right now, if you can use it, sure, it'll work, but is it certified? No, and it won't be for a little while. So
yeah, we are starting it. The certification has already started.
It's already started. Thank you.
R10 probably will remain just compatible, and 21 will be certified for sure.
Perfect. Yeah, that's usually our clip. Yeah. Cool. Next on to 40 Qodly Pro news. So before unveiling what's new, quick reminder: if you missed the 40 Qodly Pro webinar with Thomas Mull, go check out the replay. Here, I'll put it in the chat right now to everyone. Don't watch it now. Stay with us. Hundreds of attendees joined live, and the sessions really resonate with a wide range of customers. The questions and reactions are super interesting. So it's full of practical insights on how to bring modern web-based forms into your 40 application. So revamping your application with a web front end using 40 Qodly Pro on an application that you remember from a world tour, I don't know how many years ago. So definitely worth watching. And yeah, now zoom into what's new in Qodly Pro quickly, just the highlights, since the demo that I'm going to show is going to cover it all. HTTP handlers now come with a much simpler UI setup screen. The Qodly namespace gives you access to the title and location object, so you can update the browser tabs and respond to URLs instantly. On the UI side, the matrix component adds more control over selection behavior. We'll show you that a little bit later. And the date picker is now easier to navigate with dynamic date control, restriction of dates for things like that. So super cool. And now you can also fully style the select box search bar with CSS, and users get automatic connection status with no extra code. So very cool. And let me just hop over to the demo.
The purpose of this demo is to show you all the new features we have added to Qodly Pro, starting with HTTP handlers. So here in my classes, I have this utilities class, and I have this function say hello that only returns a simple object saying hello world. And my HTTP handlers, the old UI, it used to be really hard to edit multiple HTTP handlers at once, and it had a lot of dead space. With this new one, it is more efficient and easier to edit your HTTP handlers. So let's put in utilities, and I have my say hello function, and I want to call it on hello, and I want to use get request. So I'm gonna do this trick where I try to preview it, and what I'm gonna do is hello, and as you can see, it works here. Next up on the list is the new matrix selection behavior. Now, if you select your matrix, you will see that you have multiple behaviors. We have select and scroll first, select and scroll current, and no select. So let's go and try it out. Select and scroll first. I'm gonna preview this, and every time I change the data, you'll see that it selects the first item all the time. And the next one is select and scroll current. With this one, if you have a selection at an entity, it always stays there. So let's go with root, and you see, I change the data and RUD always stays selected. And the third one is the default matrix selection, which it doesn't select anything unless you select it yourself. So I can change the data here, but it doesn't select anything. But if I select it on an index, the selection stays on that index, as you can see here. And next one on the list is a new namespace called Qodly. It has information about the location object and also has information about the title, and which you can change the title and have custom titles. Let's start with location. So let's create a new page here, an empty page, call it location, and take this location and drop it on the page so we can see what kind of information it gives us. So let's preview this. As you can see here, it will give me the URL query that has all the query params that I have, query source params that I have on my link, and also URL path. It will give you all the parts of the URL, so and an array. And anchor, it will give me information about my anchor. So if I put something like hello, you will see that the anchor is here. Usually it is only one. So, and I can also have multiple params like search or something like that. And also, if you can see, I have information about location and I have information about search, but search is empty. So let's just add something here. Okay, cool. So now let's use this. So I have this people page, right? And this people page, I have an on init that takes in the location URL query dot search and searches for people. So here's the function. I take the search and I put it in a query and I order by first name. So I have that and I return people selection. All right, let's try it out. So it gives me all the people. So let's just say search and let's search for RUD. And as you can see, it will give me what I searched for. Also, what we can do is we can set a custom title. As you can see here, we have a generic people that corresponds to the page name here, but we can customize also. So let's add a new event on a net and Qodly serves. I want to change the title and I want to set the source and I want to set it to hello world. Let's save this. Let's get back here and recharge, and you will see that I have hello world on the page title. Next up, what we have added is network connectivity activity indicator. So every time, so let's just say that I disconnect from my Wi-Fi, you will see it'll give me information here that like I have lost connectivity. And if you come here, I will have like a permanent banner saying that I have lost connection. But if I connect again, you will see that it comes back. Next up, what we have is date ranges. So I'll add a new page and drop in a text input. And here, I'm gonna have it as type date. What we have added is intervals. So I can add an interval and I'm gonna call it range. And I'm gonna say from Monday to Monday 15th. So this range is all what the user can choose from. So if I come here and click here, you will see that only this range is selectable by the user. Next up is the ability to customize the search item and the select box. So here I have this search box, and you can see like we have added new classes so you can customize the search. So we have Flexbox search, Flexbox search input, and you can change the color of the icon. So if I preview this and go here, as you can see, you can customize everything about the search input. And also what we have added, let's get back here. We have this array here. As you can see, this array is scrambled and has like a lot of data, and it is hard to edit. What we can do is like you can click on this button and you can click you can edit every individual item of the array. And there you have it. That's all we have for this demo, showcasing all the new features we have with Qodly Pro.
So that went fast, and that's a lot of features. So I want to say thanks, Murad, for that great demo, a really succinct demo. So keep it going. Now, on to development news. Let's start with something that Mathieu mentioned earlier that causes real headaches, is that dependencies in your components. They can get messy real fast, especially when your components rely on other components, which rely on even more components, right? So with 40R20 R10, that complexity is now handled for you. Add your primary component, and 40 automatically loads everything else it needs recursively. Subdependency pulled in automatically. Version rules checked, conflicts resolved. You can get full visibility through the new interface, showing you what's declared, what's inherited, and where it all comes from. So your dependency tree stays clean even as your project grows. Now, I'm going to pass the mic to Ad to talk about a new data source command feature.
All right. Hi, guys. So many years ago, we have this command called object set data source, which is really nice and it works really well. Now, the command itself does work with a field reference, a variable or a pointer to one of those items. Now, it only goes so far, except that you cannot express a particular expression into an object. If you look at the widget property itself, you can see that it can be bound to either a field, a variable, or an expression. Now, with the new command, object set data source formula, you'll be able to express or bind more stuff to it. For example, you'll be able to bind a form attribute or an entity attribute, or even a computation or expression directly to an object. And this new ability gives you so many flexibility. So one of the benefit is to give you a faster an update to the UI without having to manually rewriting your code or rewiring. It also makes your form more reusable, so you don't have to duplicate your logic. It makes it more dynamic. It allows a dynamic behavior driven directly by adding your data or business logic rules dynamically. Okay, so it also works with a list box, which is nice. I'm going to give you a demonstration right now. So, Will, if you pass me the ability to share, okay. Let's see. Share. Okay. So if here's an easy example. So I'm going to start with something very simple. I have this form. I'm going to go ahead and run it. Now, there are 3 objects on the top here, and each one of them is represent different widget type. Okay. As I click on this field, you'll see that there's a little object down here. It's good morning. I click on the next field or object, you'll see that the value in here, there's some new data added in here. And if I click on the date gets assigned to this. Now, normally without the new feature, we can probably assign rebind a pointer to a variable to this object using the command object set data source. But with the new ability, we'll be able to just create an expression and bind any entity attributes or things in computation directly to an object. So I'm going to show you the code behind each of these objects. When I click on an object, I trigger an on getting focus. So I purposely make this font a little bit bigger so you all can see. So here's the command. It chooses the output object and it assigns a formula. So this formula, I choose to convert the text into uppercase and set it to this object. So if I scroll this form up a little bit, let's see, or down, you'll be able to see that here, when I run it, the text gets converted to uppercase. Similar fashion to this object, I'm choosing numeric field. When I click on it, what I'm doing is basically I'm dividing the value by 2, and then I just set it to the formula that assigned to the object output. So these type of things is very useful because it's dynamically bind expression as well as an entity attribute directly to any of the object on the form. Okay. Here's another example that I mentioned earlier. It also works with list box. So I created this dynamic list box to display all the information from our database structure. So take a look at this. I have all of these tables. I want to be able to display all of them every time when I click on any of the table name. So you can do this right now, except that you are not really creating an expression to the list box itself. You have to assign it to a list box that is bound to a collection or a form collection. So here's the code behind the scene. Okay, maybe I reduce the font size a little bit. Okay. So this top part here, this is nothing special, which is I'm going to delete whatever I have already to convert it to a new list box binding. So I'm getting the table name from whatever I'm selecting. And here's the part that is different. Using this command object set data source formula, I will be able to bind directly any collection or entity selection directly to a list box in that fashion. So the rest of them is pretty, it's the stuff that we already have in the past. This is nothing new, except that this is the new part. Okay, so as I click on any of these, I will be able to construct the columns into this list box and display all the data based on the number of selection and collection that I have. Okay, and let's see, that's it for this demo. Let's go back to you, slide, Will.
Thanks, Ad. That seems like it'll really help make applications more responsive and make it more simple to have a responsive application, and then simpler to maintain in the code base. So really cool. Oh, excuse me. All right, now let's shift focus into ORDA. Until now, if you needed to default values when creating an entity, you had to write a helper function like create new parentheses. The problem, you had to remember to use it everywhere in your code. With 40R10, 20R10, you can now define a constructor directly inside your entity class. This constructor runs automatically whenever a new entity is created. So whether it's a timestamp, the current user, or default values, it happens all behind the scenes. Just call the, for example, if ds.products.new and you're done. Create a new product. No more need for a custom create new workarounds. The logic lives in one place and is called automatically. You also avoid the mistakes or inconsistencies across different parts of your app. Data integrity is ensured across different contexts. And best of all, your initialization logic is centralized and easy to maintain, making your codebase simpler, safer, and more predictable. And when I meant to say when it's used in the same across different contexts, this is what I mean. The constructor is used when you create an entity with, for example, dsproducts.new call, or if you call ds.products.from collection when you while importing data, you're going to call that constructor for each object you're creating. When someone creates a new record in the Data Explorer, interesting, or even when a client app creates a data remotely through REST. And showing you how all that works, there's a really succinct demo that I'd like to show you right now. Brought to you by Marie-Sophie. So there we go. Share.
Welcome to this demo. I am going to show you how to implement an ORDA entity constructor. ORDA provides fully object-oriented access to data. In ORDA, everything is an object, starting with the data store itself, as well as the data classes, the tables. With ORDA, data is not managed through records, but through entity objects, which are instances of a given data class. The concept of a constructor is now available for these entity objects. So let's start working with this products table. On this form, we can create a new product, and we can see that the creation date and the comment attributes are pre-assigned. Let's look at the implementation. This is handled in the code like this. The new product entity is instantiated and after the attributes are initialized. So when I create a product, we can verify that this implementation works. But this type of default initialization can be factored in the constructor of the product's entity class. So I comment this code, I also copy it, and I am opening now the product's entity class, and I implement the constructor. The syntax is the same as for a regular class. I passed the code. The this keyword refers to the current instance, so to the current entity. So the stamp and the comment attributes are initialized now in the constructor. Let's test again the form. So it works. I can create my new product. We can also check the data in the Data Explorer. So all works properly. But the constructor does not apply only when calling the new function to instantiate a new entity. It applies to any creation of a new entity on the server, regardless of how it is created. Now let's try sending data to the REST server to create a new products entity with the API method update. So I send this request, and we can verify that the attributes have been correctly initialized with the default values. And the last check, what happens if we send to the server an attribute that is initialized by the constructor? I had here the comment attribute because it is set by the constructor. And we are going to check what happens in this case. I send the request, and in the Data Explorer we verify that the constructor has been properly executed, but the value sent by the client for the command attribute has been kept. So the implementation of the constructor allows for even more object-oriented entity management. Attribute value initialization can be centralized in a single place, which optimizes the code. Thank you for attending.
Yeah, so really cool way to have let's say a default constructor in your application. For an object for an entity object. So very cool. And next, I'm going to pass the mic again to Ad, and he can talk about touched events in ORDA. And I see some questions coming in. Keep them coming in, guys. We'll everyone, we can we'll talk about them in a
Okay.
little bit.
So let's explore some new exciting new feature order events, which can be thought of as the modern counterpart to classic table triggers. So starting in V20 R10, we are opening a new chapter in memory data events. Events that triggered with or without user interaction directly from a form. This is huge. The first events that we are talking about in this series is touch event. And the order abstraction layer can be can now react to any change made to the data in the memory on an entity. So what does it benefit us? It gives us a real-time validation, formatting before saving. It keeps things very clean. It allows you to validate format input as soon as the entity is modified. It's centralized logic. Instead of scattering logic across multiple form events, you can now centralize it in the data class. It allows you to index query optimization. It gives you an ability to scalar attributes to keep your scalar attributes updated as soon as the input is touch, making them queryable with index support. And also, the command itself, lastly, it is very useful in case of performing a query that's involved comparison between multiple attributes. And it can't always be used indexed with touch, but you can pre-compile and store result in scalar field, then query it efficiently. Next one, Will. It also, sorry. So the touch doesn't just work with the entity itself, it also works with the attributes. So to give you a very clean example, let me jump to the demo and we'll see how it works. Okay. So here I have this very simple method, 2 lines of code. The first line is to load an entity. The second line is to make modification. I'm going to trigger a trace into the debugger. So let's have a look at the value here. Currently is Susan, and I'm going to put another expression in here, and I'm going to call touch. Okay, so currently is false because we have not yet modified the data. So as soon as I hit this line, you can see that the touch status is now set to true. This is again just like any other events. This is the time where you will react to this event. Doesn't really matter what it is, but this is where you can save and check the status of the record or entity and move on from there. Okay, so that's very cool. But what about at the field level? So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to go ahead and just finish it. Now we can check to see what happened to a field itself and make modification to some data. For example, we want to set it to um, an uppercase. Okay, so I have here in the clipboard, just paste it in. So in the entity class for employee table, so what I want is anytime that the first name has been modified or touched, I want to convert only the first letter to uppercase and keep everything else as lowercase. Okay, what I'm going to do here, I'm going to save. I'm going to pull this down a little bit so we can all see. We execute the method. Okay, the same. So you can see that down here, Maria is all lowercase. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to run this code, and immediately the first letter will become capitalized and the rest will be lowercase. Okay, so this is very straightforward for the standalone. Now, what happened when we do all these things in the client server? Because everything that is happening here is locally and is happening in the memory. So I'm going to quit and quit my application. I'm going to relaunch this application in for the server. I'm going to connect to it with the client. Okay, so let's go back. Now, let's go back here. We're going to do exactly the same thing as we did before, okay? So I'm going to run the code. Okay, so watch what happened now when I make changes to this field. Okay, touch status has changed. Remember, I just created the touch event in our data class, but nothing changed here, and that's because there are two scenarios that can happen, and you have to choose which one you want. Okay, so when run here, so if you want something to happen on the client side immediately as soon as something happened to a field or an entity, you need to use the keyword local. Okay, so what it's going to do here is going to make sure that the event gets triggered in this fashion and perform all of these code on the client side. So now we can go back and take a look at. Okay, so you can see that the code gets executed properly, and that's great. Okay, so that's what you want. Now, let's say if you don't want this to happen at this time, but you only want it to happen at the time that you save the record. Now, what you can choose to do is to leave out this keyword. Now, let's add a new line. To save the data. So we'll see what happened here. Again, execute that second line, nothing changed. As soon as I save the record, the data is changed because the event happened on the server side. Okay, so these are the difference between using the keyword local or not. It depends on what your preference or what you want it to behave. All right, so that's it. Let's go back to you, Will.
Thanks, Ed. Really cool way to show how you can start to untangle a little bit all of this touched events. It's a new concept. It's touching in memory. It's a little bit strange, but if that piques your interest and you feel like to learn more, I invite you to look at Marie Sophie's ORDA Touch by Event deep dive blog post. Okay. Now, switching gears a little bit, we'll talk about some improvements on the networking side. So, with 4020 R10, the TCP Connection class now introduces a new connection timeout attribute or property. This gives you full control about how long 40 should wait while trying to establish a network connection. If the timeout's reached, connection's aborted, no more hanging or freezing. Now, this brings three key benefits for you right away, right out of the box. So you can define latency thresholds to keep your app responsive, automatically abort longer stalled requests, and recover quickly from network errors instead of indefinitely waiting. It's a small line of code and a big step forward for performance and user experience. And now let's talk about something that completes the network picture a little bit more in 4D. With 20R10, we've added the new UDPSocket class, building on the TCP connection from R8 and the TCP listener from R9. So, and this new class gives you full support for UDP communication in 4D, both client and server. Because it's lightweight and connectionless, there's no persistent link between in UDP communication, no delivery guarantees, and it's designed for send and forget scenarios, like a message in a bottle, a little bit, hopefully a little bit better than that. That makes it ideal for cases like IoT devices that just stream data and you can either choose or not to receive it, real-time monitoring or broadcasting updates to more than once, or even television, right? Things like that, quickly and efficiently. You also get support for asynchronous and preemptive operations, a modern replacement for the old Internet Commands plugin. And of course, it's all native to 4D. And to show you how simple it is, there's a couple of slides that show how you can really get this up and running and just play with it. It's really fun. Now, and we can see how it works in practice. So here's a UDP client. So there's your constructor. That's all you need to build your UDP client. You create a UDP socket. You set the port and you set the IP and the port. Boom. To send a message, you just need to hit the call the send function of the UDP class. So send message just sends it to that port and that IP that's been defined in your default constructor. And that's it. Your UDP class is ready to use. And then you can send message to a UDP server, no response expected, no connection needed. A true fire and forget approach. Well, speaking of UDP server, to build a UDP server, it's just as easy. You'll need the same native UDPSocket class plus a listening port where you're going to be listening to. Then a message comes in with your on data callback. That gets triggered automatically when a message comes in, letting you process the data in the way that you want. This just sends an alert. And everything can run asynchronously, so you can throw all of your UDP socket into its own worker, so you can keep your app responsive and have everything run in a separate core. So you just you run your server in a worker and keep it fully isolated and always listening. And now let's move on to another key improvement in 20R10, stricter class-based typing for objects. Previously, 4D only checked whether something was an object, but that wasn't enough to prevent logical errors. You could still assign completely unrelated objects, like a shelter to an animal, right? That doesn't make any sense. And only to find out later in runtime. Great. Hopefully in test. Now 4D verifies the actual class type at compile time, but also while typing in the editor. So if you try to assign the wrong type, you immediately get an error. No more guessing, no more silent bugs of that nature. This gives you two benefits: smarter auto-completion and stricter compile time checks to catch mistakes earlier. And that's not just for variables or functions. This also applies directly to your data model. In the structure editor, you can now assign a specific class to an object field. For example, you can link a 4D vector class to a 4D vector object type in your data model. This means that 4D doesn't see an object. It knows it's a vector with all the associated methods and properties. From design to runtime, everything stays consistent and type safe. And inside the editor, you get instant auto-completion based on declared class. Someone brought up a question earlier today about whether or not the vector fields are project mode or binary mode. This feature, for example, is only a project mode feature. call back to that. Now let's talk about UUIDs. Up until now, 40 generated UUIDs using system functions, typically version 4. And these, as you may know, are completely random, which is great for uniqueness. But it's not great if you care about sorting or tracking when something was created. Now with 20R10, that changes. UUIDs are now generated internally, and you can now opt for version 7, which includes a timestamp prefix. That means your UUIDs are no longer just random, they're also chronologically sortable, and with the randomness that's needed in the UUID. Why does that matter? Because now new records naturally can appear in order. No need to manually add a timestamp or sort logic in your application. And it's especially true for things like logging, creation tracking, and any kind of order list. And since the timestamp goes down to the microsecond, you actually get more precision than the traditional timestamp command. Now, by default, 40 still uses version 4 UUIDs. To enable sorting, switch to version 7, either in settings or generate UUID 7 for all of your current UUIDs. That's it. Super simple, and you can have old UUIDs and new UUIDs working together, just you won't have the sorting with the old one. So super cool. And Damien is going to show a quick demo of this, of how this works in action.
Hi everyone, this demo will show you how 4D handles version 7 UUIDs. As a reminder, UUIDs are 128-bit integers, usually represented in hexadecimal format. Until now, 4D used system functions to generate UUIDs, which resulted in version 4 UUIDs. With 4D 20R10, 4D now generates UUIDs internally to control the version being produced. If I click this button, I'll generate version 4 UUIDs along with a creation sequence. When I click on an item, I can see the UUID version. Version 4 UUIDs are almost entirely random, so sorting them is meaningless. As you can see here, the creation sequence is not respected. On the other hand, version 7 UUIDs are prefixed with a timestamp. If I generate UUIDs, I can see that they can be sorted in a current way. How did I generate these two versions of UUIDs? It's very simple. I click the trace button to view the code. For version 4, it's the same generate UUID command you're already using. For version 7, you simply pass the value 7 to the generate UUID command. It's very straightforward and ensures the longevity of your developments. On the database side, version 4 is still used by default for automatic UUID fields, as you can see here after generating 10 records with their sequence. If I want to switch to version 7, I just open the structure settings and select the version to use. Then I simply restart my project. I generate new UUIDs. They are now version 7. Simple, isn't it? I hope this demo was helpful. See you soon!
A really cool usage of how you can see and use UUID 7, so awesome. I think now let's talk about the useful enhancements in 4D NetKit. Calendar management. You can now manage events using Google Calendar and Microsoft 365 API right from your 4D code. First, you can create events programmatically. Just set your event details and use the create event function. Second, you can update events like adding or removing attendees without having to cancel or recreate. Just use the update event function. And third, you can delete with using the delete event function, which provides useful cleanup and cancellations. All this helps keep your calendars accurate and your team alive without being overly verbose and using the built-in features. Also, as you can see, works out of the box for both Google and Microsoft 365. So very cool features. Now, okay, development features done. Any questions? I see we had a couple. So someone asked, when switching to version 7 UUIDs on restart, does all the UUIDs get recreated? That's answered in the blog, and the answer is no. But you can recreate them yourself. But if you do recreate some and not others, they can still work in conjunction with each other. That's what I've understood as well. So backwards compatibility, like always, we try to support, and here is no difference. And then Jeremy asked about UDPSocket class, which ports you should be using. I guess any ports that make sense for your application, not ports that are already in use, not things like 443, 80, maybe keep them higher, right? Some applications and firewalls like to keep a lower port for communication in networks used for other things. So it all depends on you, but you can set them. You have the freedom to set them to whatever you'd like to. So like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, things like that. That's just I don't know what maybe add that.
Yeah, there's a certain port that is restricted for a particular service like DNS and stuff like that. So so it depends on your server. Those are the server defined ports, so you need to kind of know what they are.
Yep. So thank you. And then someone asks about the constructor, right? Again, that's the default constructor. So I think we just showed up with the default constructor. I can only imagine that there's going to be an overloaded constructor where you can put in your own parameters. I'm not sure though. I had a quick look on the forum and I didn't see a feature request for that. So if that's a perfect candidate for a feature request, not having to have another to having a non-default constructor or overloading it, being able to overload the constructor with parameters. I think it's a great thing. I mean, that's how other programming languages do it, and I think it makes a lot of sense. So I'm going to direct you to the forum for that, discuss.40.com. And I think that's it for the questions right now. If anything does come up, we're in the home stretch now, and we're going to talk about deployment news. No more demos. This is you can now embed deployment licenses automatically. So your builds are portable, version controlled, and ready to use across machines. No more editing license paths or setting things up manually. And these features right now are in direct response to a lot of things that we talked about at the beginning of the year. This is your needs for all of this for your licensing for when you work with your customers. We're trying to answer all of those questions and concerns that we had towards the beginning of the year. So let's just take a quick walkthrough and walk through all of the current features that have been rolled in through the past features and finalized in R10. The first one is the default, no license included. This means the user will have to register a license when they launch the app. As developers, you define, right? These are things that you're going to be defining when you build your application. This works fine when deploying manually or leaving the license to the end user, depending on your business model. Next, you've got an evaluation option. It's great to build demos or quick tests. No need for licenses, just build and run. You're set up with a 14-day limit there. There's some blog posts to discuss that as well. Then comes automatic embedding. Here, 40 checks your machine for a valid deployment license and includes them in the app. You don't need to specify anything manually, and nothing is hard-coded into the build settings. This means the file is cleaner and easier to reuse or share across teams. Think of the Excel model. I think that someone brought up at some point. And finally, if you prefer full control, which some of you do, you can manually define which license to embed. This works just like before, and it's useful if you need to match a specific setup or stick to a known list. So that's a big recap on all of the changes that have been happening in licenses. Any questions about that or anything we've covered thus far? Now I'm going to keep powering through. There's an upcoming webinar next week. I invite you all to join. I think it's going to be a really interesting one. It's really cool things, talking about covering a CSS and 4D design and using CSS and 4D desktop forms. Ad did a great World Tour demo, and this is kind of building on that. But no, World Tour, Summit demo, I think a few years ago. Yeah. Like someone asked a question for licenses. Are you talking about 40 licenses, not our product licenses? Yes, 40 licenses. And as always, when new features come out, the first place we all read about them is on the blog. We hear about them, talked about, things like that from the team, but that's really where we first started playing with everything, get our how-to-whys, get our first initial questions answered. And then Ad and I like to read through that, speak with the team, and to be able to present all of the amazing features and all the hard work that the team is doing. So if anything here piqued your interest, by all means, there's way more on the blog starting there. And I want to say thank you for attending to this marathon session. It was a long one. I think it's worth it. And I think the demos will really speak to things that your customers need for their application, and especially AI features, Qodly features, all sorts of different things going on. So major undertakings in the 4D, and the next webinar is going to be for 4021, and that should be in January timeframe. So really look forward to that. So if you haven't already, download the beta and tell us what you think. We're open ears. We always have open ears, open minds, open hearts to hear what the users use, the developers, how they use our application. So feel free. Thank you very much, everyone, and have an amazing rest of your day. Bye-bye.